The silence was deafening, broken only by the crackling fireplace, the same fireplace my grandmother used to tell me stories beside. Now, all I felt was an icy dread. The papers felt like lead in my trembling hands, the ink blurred with unshed tears as I reread the clause, the one that had ripped my family apart. They thought they had outsmarted me, that grief had made me blind, but they underestimated the bond my grandmother and I shared, a bond stronger than any legal document. If you would defend your sister's honor with your last breath, subscribe now. My grandmother, bless her soul, had always been the anchor of our family. A woman of unwavering strength and quiet dignity, she had built her life from the ground up, culminating in the stunning mountain lodge nestled deep within the redwood forests of Northern California. It wasn't just a house, it was a sanctuary, a place filled with laughter, warmth, and the comforting aroma of Grandma Rose's famous apple pie. From the time I was a little girl, escaping the chaos of city life, the lodge had been my haven. Summers were spent hiking through sun-dappled trails, winters huddled by the fire, listening to her tales of adventure and resilience. It was a place where family gathered, where memories were forged, and where I felt truly at home. So when Grandma Rose passed away peacefully in her sleep last month, a piece of me went with her. The will reading was supposed to be a somber affair, a final goodbye, a formal passing of the torch. Instead, it devolved into a battlefield of greed and resentment, a stark reminder of the ugly truths that lurked beneath the surface of our seemingly perfect family. My name is Brooklyn, and I watched, stunned, as my aunts, uncles, and even some of my cousins bared their teeth, their eyes gleaming with avarice as the lawyer droned on about assets and inheritances. Everyone expected the lodge to be split equally, a shared responsibility, a place for us all to continue making memories. But Grandma Rose, in her infinite wisdom, had other plans. The will clearly stated that the mountain lodge, along with its surrounding acreage, was to be bequeathed solely to me. A collective gasp filled the room. The air crackled with disbelief, and then, almost immediately, hostility. My Aunt Carol, a woman known for her sharp tongue and even sharper elbows, was the first to speak, her voice dripping with venom. She accused me of manipulating my grandmother, of poisoning her mind with lies and half-truths. My Uncle Richard, a man whose business ventures had consistently failed, chimed in, claiming I was too young and inexperienced to manage such a valuable property. Even my own parents, usually supportive and understanding, seemed hesitant, their eyes filled with a mixture of concern and disapproval. It was as if the very notion of me, Brooklyn, a young woman barely out of college, being entrusted with the family legacy, was an affront to their sense of entitlement.
What followed was a barrage of insults, accusations, and thinly veiled threats. They questioned my intentions, my capabilities, my very character. They painted me as a selfish, opportunistic gold digger, someone who had somehow tricked their way into Grandma Rose's good graces. I sat there, stunned and heartbroken, as the people I had always considered family tore me apart, piece by piece. The lodge, once a symbol of love and unity, had become a weapon, a tool to be wielded against me in their desperate quest for wealth. The person I trusted most was one of them, my cousin, Emily. We had grown up together, shared secrets, dreams, and countless adventures at the lodge. I always believed that she was my ally, my confidant, the one person who would stand by me, no matter what. But as the chaos unfolded, I saw a flicker of something else in her eyes, a cold, calculating ambition that I had never noticed before. She didn't defend me. She didn't offer a word of support. Instead, she remained silent, her gaze fixed on the lawyer, her expression unreadable. Later that evening, after everyone had dispersed, their anger and disappointment hanging heavy in the air, Emily approached me. I braced myself for an apology, an explanation, some sign of remorse. But what she said next shattered the last vestiges of my faith in her. She told me that I should do the right thing and sell the lodge, that it was too much for me to handle, and that the money could be used to benefit the entire family. She even suggested that I wasn't worthy of Grandma Rose's gift, that I hadn't earned it like the rest of them. In that moment, I realized that Emily wasn't just another disgruntled relative. She was a key player in this twisted game, a wolf in sheep's clothing, and that the betrayal cut deeper than any of the others. They had all underestimated me. They thought I was weak, easily manipulated, and that I would cave under pressure. But they were wrong. I wouldn't let their greed and resentment destroy Grandma Rose's legacy. I would fight for what was rightfully mine, and I would expose their true colors, no matter the cost. The days that followed were a blur of legal consultations, tense phone calls, and sleepless nights. My initial shock had morphed into a steely resolve, but the constant pressure from my family was relentless. They launched a full-scale assault on my character, spreading rumors about my competence, questioning my mental stability, and even attempting to dredge up long-forgotten incidents from my past. Aunt Carol, with her network of influential friends and her uncanny ability to manipulate public opinion, was the ringleader, poisoning the minds of anyone who would listen. She started a whisper campaign within our small community, suggesting that I was planning to sell the lodge to developers, that I would destroy the pristine wilderness that Grandma Rose had so fiercely protected.
Soon, I was receiving hate mail, anonymous phone calls filled with vile threats, and glares from strangers on the street. My attempts to reason with them, to explain my vision for the lodge, to assure them that I would honor Grandma Rose's legacy, fell on deaf ears. They were convinced that I was driven by greed, blinded by ambition, and that no amount of persuasion would change my mind. Even my parents, succumbing to the pressure from their siblings, began to distance themselves from me, their voices laced with disappointment and disapproval. The isolation was crushing. The weight of their collective animosity pressed down on me, suffocating me, making it difficult to breathe. I found myself questioning my own sanity, wondering if I was truly capable of handling the responsibility that Grandma Rose had entrusted to me. The lodge, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison, its walls closing in on me, trapping me in a nightmare of family discord and bitter resentment. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside my window seemed to whisper accusations, reminding me of the battle I was fighting and the seemingly insurmountable odds I faced. I tried to find solace in the memories of Grandma Rose, in the warmth of her embrace, in the wisdom of her words. I spent hours poring over old photographs, tracing the lines of her face, listening to her voice in my head, desperately seeking guidance and strength. But even those cherished memories were tainted by the present reality, by the knowledge that the people I had once loved and trusted were now actively trying to undermine me, to destroy everything that Grandma Rose had worked so hard to build. Desperate to find a solution, I proposed a compromise. I offered to share the lodge with my family, to create a schedule that would allow everyone to enjoy the property, to involve them in the decision-making process. I even suggested establishing a family trust to ensure the lodge's long-term preservation. But my offers were rejected outright. They didn't want to share. They wanted to control. They didn't want to compromise. They wanted to conquer. Their ultimate goal was clear: to force me to sell the lodge and divide the profits amongst themselves. The realization that their greed had completely eclipsed their sense of family, that they were willing to sacrifice our shared history and cherished memories for the sake of money, was a devastating blow. It solidified my resolve to fight back, to protect Grandma Rose's legacy, and to expose their true motives to the world. I knew that it wouldn't be easy, that I would face immense challenges and endure unimaginable pain. But I also knew that I couldn't back down, that I owed it to Grandma Rose, to myself, and to the future generations of our family to stand my ground and defend what was rightfully mine. The lodge was more than just a piece of property. It was a symbol of love, resilience, and family unity. And I wouldn't let their avarice destroy it. Sleepless nights became the norm. Every shadow seemed to lengthen into grotesque shapes, every sound amplified, a constant reminder of the battle raging around me. My anxiety manifested in physical ways: a persistent knot in my stomach, tension headaches that blurred my vision, and a bone-deep fatigue that no amount of sleep could alleviate. I lost weight, my skin paled, and dark circles formed under my eyes. I was a shell of my former self, consumed by the relentless pressure and the gnawing fear that I would ultimately fail. The legal battles were draining, both emotionally and financially.
My family had hired a team of high-powered lawyers determined to challenge the validity of Grandma Rose's will. They argued that she was mentally incompetent when she signed the document, that I had exerted undue influence over her, and that the will was therefore invalid. I had to scramble to find legal representation, to gather evidence to support my case, and to prepare myself for the inevitable courtroom showdown. The legal fees were astronomical, threatening to bankrupt me, and I wouldn't let their avarice destroy it. Sleepless nights became the norm. Every shadow seemed to lengthen into grotesque shapes, every sound amplified, a constant reminder of the battle raging around me. My anxiety manifested in physical ways, a persistent knot in my stomach, tension headaches that blurred my vision, and a bone-deep fatigue that no amount of sleep could alleviate. I lost weight, my skin paled, and dark circles formed under my eyes. I was a shell of my former self, consumed by the relentless pressure and the gnawing fear that I would ultimately fail. The legal battles were draining, both emotionally and financially. My family had hired a team of high-powered lawyers determined to challenge the validity of Grandma Rose's will. They argued that she was mentally incompetent when she signed the document, that I had exerted undue influence over her, and that the will was therefore invalid. I had to scramble to find legal representation, to gather evidence to support my case, and to prepare myself for the inevitable courtroom showdown. The legal fees were astronomical, threatening to bankrupt me, but I refused to give up. I knew that if I lost the legal battle, I would lose everything, not just the lodge, but also my reputation, my sense of self-worth, and my faith in humanity. The weight of injustice pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating. I felt like David facing Goliath, armed with nothing but my determination and my unwavering belief in what was right. But I knew that even David had a plan, a strategy to overcome his seemingly insurmountable odds, and I was determined to develop my own plan, to find a way to expose my family's greed and corruption, and to reclaim the legacy that was rightfully mine. The time for quiet resolve was over. The time for action had begun. The day they tried to take my life was the day they signed their own downfall. I was driving back from another grueling meeting with the lawyers, the rain mirroring the storm inside me. The winding mountain road was slick, visibility near zero. Suddenly, a pair of headlights appeared in my rearview mirror, growing larger with terrifying speed. Before I could react, a black SUV slammed into my bumper, sending my car careening towards the edge of the cliff. I gripped the steering wheel, fighting to maintain control, but it was no use. The world spun in a dizzying kaleidoscope of rain, trees, and sky as my car plunged over the precipice. Time seemed to slow down as I braced for impact, the image of Grandma Rose's smiling face flashing through my mind. Then, darkness. I woke up in a hospital bed, my body screaming in protest. Every breath was a painful reminder of the near-fatal plunge. Broken ribs, a fractured collarbone, and a severe concussion were just the beginning. The doctors told me I was lucky to be alive, that a few more feet and the outcome would have been drastically different. But as I lay there, surrounded by beeping machines and sterile white walls, I didn't feel lucky. I felt betrayed, violated, and utterly alone. The police investigation concluded that the crash was an accident, caused by the hazardous road conditions and the other driver's negligence. But I knew the truth. This wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate attempt to silence me, to remove me from the equation, to pave the way for my family to seize control of the lodge. They had crossed a line, descending into a level of depravity I never thought possible. And in that moment, lying broken and battered in a hospital bed, something inside me snapped. The grief, the fear, the self-doubt, they all coalesced into a cold, burning rage. I was done being the victim. I was done playing by their rules. It was time to fight back, to expose their wickedness, and to make them pay for what they had done. Their recovery was slow and arduous. Physical therapy was excruciating, each session a painful reminder of my vulnerability. The nightmares were relentless, replaying the crash over and over again, each time with a new level of terror. I was haunted by the image of the black SUV, by the knowledge that my own family had tried to end me. But with each passing day, my resolve grew stronger. I channeled my anger and pain into planning, meticulously plotting my revenge. I knew that I couldn't confront them directly, that they would deny everything and continue to manipulate the situation to their advantage. I had to be smarter, more cunning, more ruthless. I needed to gather evidence, to expose their lies, and to turn their own schemes against them. I started by hiring a private investigator, someone I could trust to dig deep and uncover the truth. I provided him with a list of names, dates, and suspicious activities, urging him to leave no stone unturned. I also began to secretly record my phone calls and meetings with my family, capturing their incriminating statements and subtle admissions of guilt. It was a risky move, but I knew that it was necessary to protect myself and to build an airtight case against them. The lodge, once a symbol of warmth and family, now felt like a battleground, a place where I had to constantly be on guard, anticipating their next move. Every conversation was a test, every interaction a potential trap. I had to learn to play their game, to deceive and manipulate, to hide my true intentions behind a facade of vulnerability and compliance. It was a dark and unsettling transformation, but I knew that it was the only way to survive.
Their biggest weakness? They thought they were untouchable. Aunt Carol, with her social connections and her manipulative charm, believed that she could control everyone around her. Uncle Richard, with his failed business ventures and his desperate need for money, was easily swayed by promises of wealth and power. And Emily, my cousin, blinded by her own ambition and her desire for approval, was willing to do anything to please them. They were a tangled web of greed, envy, and resentment, each one feeding off the other's weaknesses, and I was determined to unravel that web, to expose their vulnerabilities, and to watch their carefully constructed world crumble around them. The investigator uncovered a trail of financial improprieties, hidden assets, and shady deals that linked my family to a network of corrupt officials and unscrupulous developers. He discovered that they had been secretly plotting to sell the lodge to a large corporation, disregarding Grandma Rose's wishes and betraying the trust of the community. He also found evidence that they had been deliberately sabotaging my efforts to manage the property, spreading false rumors and interfering with my business dealings. And most shockingly, he uncovered a connection between my family and the black SUV that had run me off the road. The driver, a known criminal with a history of violence, had been paid a large sum of money to send a message. The message was clear: get out of the way, or face the consequences. The evidence was overwhelming, irrefutable, and utterly damning. I had everything I needed to expose their wickedness and to bring them to justice. The game had changed. They thought they had broken me, silenced me, and taken everything from me. But they were wrong. I was back, stronger and more determined than ever, and I was ready to unleash my revenge. I smiled. I played their game. I acted the part of the grieving, overwhelmed victim, attending family dinners, feigning interest in their plans for the lodge, all the while secretly recording every word, every gesture, every subtle clue that would solidify their guilt. I installed hidden cameras in my office at the lodge, disguised as smoke detectors and innocuous desk ornaments, capturing their clandestine meetings and hushed conversations. I consulted with a forensic accountant, meticulously tracing the flow of money, uncovering the web of shell corporations and offshore accounts they had used to hide their illicit activities. It was a dangerous game, a high-stakes dance with deception, but I was determined to outmaneuver them, to expose their treachery to the world. The hardest part was maintaining the facade, pretending that I hadn't discovered their dark secret, that I hadn't pieced together the puzzle of their wickedness. At times, I wanted to scream, to confront them with the evidence, to watch their faces crumble as their carefully constructed lies fell apart. But I knew that I had to be patient, that I had to wait for the perfect moment to strike, to unleash the full force of my revenge. There were close calls, moments when I thought they suspected something, when their eyes lingered on me a little too long, when their questions became a little too pointed. But I managed to maintain my composure, to deflect their suspicions with carefully crafted responses and well-timed displays of vulnerability. I even started leaking false information, feeding them tidbits of misinformation to lull them into a false sense of security, to make them believe that I was still naive and easily manipulated. It was a risky strategy,
But it worked. They became complacent, confident that they had me right where they wanted me, oblivious to the storm that was brewing beneath the surface. The anticipation was almost unbearable, the constant pressure threatening to crack my carefully constructed facade. But I held on, fueled by my anger and my unwavering determination to avenge Grandma Rose and to reclaim what was rightfully mine. I knew that the longer I waited, the more devastating the blow would be when it finally landed. I spent hours studying the law, researching their crimes, and consulting with my legal team to develop an airtight case. We meticulously documented every instance of fraud, every act of sabotage, every attempt to intimidate me. We gathered witness testimonies, expert opinions, and forensic evidence, building a mountain of proof that would be impossible for them to deny. I also worked with a public relations firm to develop a media strategy to ensure that the truth would be disseminated far and wide, reaching every corner of the community and beyond. I wanted the world to know what they had done, to see them for who they truly were: greedy, corrupt, and utterly ruthless. The plan was intricate, complex, and meticulously detailed. Every contingency accounted for, every possible outcome anticipated. It was a masterpiece of deception and strategy, a testament to my unwavering resolve and my burning desire for justice. The exact day they tried to end me, I would expose the truth. The turning point came during a seemingly innocuous family gathering. We were all gathered at Aunt Carol's lavish mansion, celebrating her birthday, the air thick with forced smiles and thinly veiled animosity. I sat quietly, observing them, listening to their empty conversations, watching them congratulate themselves on their impending victory. They had no idea that their world was about to come crashing down around them. As the evening progressed, I noticed Emily slipping away, disappearing into Aunt Carol's study. Curiosity piqued, I followed her, careful to remain undetected. Peeking through the slightly ajar door, I saw Emily huddled with Aunt Carol and Uncle Richard, their voices hushed and conspiratorial. I activated the hidden camera on my phone, recording their conversation.
They were discussing the final details of their plan to sell the lodge, gloating about how they had manipulated me, and even joking about the accident that had almost taken my life. The evidence was irrefutable. I had them. My heart pounded in my chest, adrenaline coursing through my veins. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for. I quietly slipped away, returning to the party as if nothing had happened, my face a mask of calm. But inside, I was seething with anger and anticipation. I knew that I had to act fast before they had a chance to cover their tracks or to concoct another scheme. I excused myself from the party, feigning a headache, and drove back to the lodge, my mind racing, finalizing the last details of my plan. I contacted my lawyer, informing him that I was ready to proceed. I alerted the private investigator, instructing him to be on standby. And I reached out to the media, promising them an explosive story that would rock the community to its core. Everything was in place. The stage was set. The players were ready, and the curtain was about to rise. The news broke the following morning, a coordinated release to every major news outlet, alongside a dedicated website I'd secretly commissioned. The headline screamed, "Lodge Family Dynasty Exposed in Multi-Million-Dollar Fraud Scheme." The website contained copies of the financial records, transcripts of the recorded conversations, and even the video from Aunt Carol's study, pixelated just enough to protect the innocent, but clear enough to damn the guilty. Within hours, the story went viral. Social media exploded with outrage. News channels ran continuous coverage. The local community, once enamored with my family's legacy, turned against them with a vengeance. Aunt Carol's socialite friends deserted her. Uncle Richard's business associates cut ties, and Emily, ostracized and ashamed, retreated into silence. The police launched a full-scale investigation, raiding my family's homes and offices, seizing documents and computers. The district attorney announced that he intended to file criminal charges, including fraud, conspiracy, and attempted assault. The walls were closing in, and there was nowhere left for them to run. I watched it all unfold from the sanctuary of the lodge, a sense of grim satisfaction washing over me. It was over. They had lost. But I wasn't finished yet. I had one final card to play, one last act of revenge that would solidify their downfall and ensure that they could never harm me or anyone else again. I knew that they would be desperate,
that they would try anything to salvage their reputation and to avoid prison. They would likely turn on each other, each one trying to pin the blame on someone else. And that was exactly what I wanted. I sent a message to Aunt Carol using an untraceable encrypted email, offering her a deal.
I told her that I was willing to drop the charges against her to protect her from the worst of the consequences if she would cooperate with the investigation and provide evidence against Uncle Richard and Emily. I knew that she was the most vulnerable, the most susceptible to manipulation. Her social status, her reputation, her freedom, they were all at stake, and I was offering her a way out, a chance to save herself, even if it meant sacrificing her own family. The meeting took place late that night, in a deserted parking garage on the outskirts of town. The rain was coming down in sheets, mirroring the turmoil in my soul. Aunt Carol arrived alone, her face pale and drawn, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and desperation. She was a shadow of her former self, the confident, manipulative socialite replaced by a broken, defeated woman. "What do you want?" she croaked, her voice barely above a whisper. I smiled, a cold, calculating smile that sent a shiver down her spine. "I want the truth," I said. "I want you to confess everything. I want you to expose Uncle Richard and Emily for who they really are." She hesitated, her eyes darting around nervously, as if she expected someone to jump out of the shadows. "I can't," she said. "They'll destroy me." "They're already destroying you," I countered. "You're facing prison time, financial ruin, and the complete loss of your reputation. This is your only chance to save yourself." I handed her a folder containing a pre-written confession, detailing the entire scheme, from the initial plan to defraud Grandma Rose to the attempt on my life. All she had to do was sign it. She stared at the document, her hand trembling, her mind clearly racing. The rain intensified, the sound echoing through the empty garage like a drumbeat, heightening the tension. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, she reached for the pen. "I'll do it," she whispered. "I'll sign it." But as she was about to put pen to paper, a pair of headlights appeared in the distance, growing larger with terrifying speed. A black SUV, identical to the one that had run me off the road, screeched into the parking garage, blocking our exit. The doors flew open, and two masked figures emerged, their faces hidden, their intentions clear. They were here to silence us both. Aunt Carol gasped, her eyes wide with terror. "They know," she screamed. "They know I'm betraying them." I grabbed her hand, pulling her towards my car, adrenaline coursing through my veins. This was it, the final showdown, the moment of truth, the culmination of months of planning, plotting, and waiting. I had led them into my trap. Now it was time to spring it. As the masked figures advanced, their weapons glinting in the dim light, I pressed a button on my key fob, and the entire parking garage exploded in a blinding flash of light and a deafening roar. They never stood a chance.
The explosion wasn't random. It was meticulously planned. Months ago, suspecting an attempt on my life, I'd wired the entire parking structure with explosives, disguised as structural supports. The key fob wasn't just a car opener. It was the detonator. The blast ripped through the garage, a searing inferno that consumed everything in its path. The black SUV was vaporized, the masked figures incinerated before they could even react. Aunt Carol, shielded by my body, survived, though severely injured and traumatized. The scene was chaos. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder as first responders raced to the scene. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid smell of burning metal and concrete. I pulled Aunt Carol from the wreckage, her face streaked with crimson and soot, her eyes wide with disbelief. She stared at me, a mixture of gratitude and horror on her face. You planned this?" she stammered, her voice barely audible above the din. I simply nodded, my expression cold and unforgiving. "This is what happens when you try to end me," I said. "This is what happens when you betray your family." I left her there, amidst the wreckage and the chaos, to face the consequences of her actions. I knew that she would never be the same, that the memory of that night would haunt her for the rest of her days. The fallout was swift and brutal. The discovery of the wired parking garage, the charred remains of the black SUV and its occupants, and Aunt Carol's confession sent shockwaves through the community and beyond. Uncle Richard and Emily were immediately arrested, their faces plastered across every news channel.
Their carefully constructed world crumbled around them, their reputations in tatters, their futures uncertain. Uncle Richard, stripped of his wealth and power, was a broken man, his arrogance replaced by a desperate plea for leniency. Emily, ostracized by her friends and family, was consumed by shame and regret, her ambition replaced by a haunting sense of emptiness. Aunt Carol, though initially hailed as a hero for her cooperation with the authorities, was ultimately shunned by society, forever branded as a traitor and a conspirator. The lodge, once a symbol of my family's legacy, was now tainted by scandal and deceit. The community, once trusting and supportive, was now divided and disillusioned. The damage was extensive, the wounds deep. I watched it all from a distance, a sense of detachment washing over me. The anger that had consumed me for so long began to dissipate, replaced by a quiet sense of resolution. I had achieved my revenge. I had exposed their wickedness, brought them to justice, and reclaimed what was rightfully mine. But the victory felt hollow, the satisfaction fleeting. The cost had been high, the collateral damage significant. I had lost my family, my community, and a part of myself in the process. I had become the very thing I had sought to destroy. I sold the lodge. I couldn't bear to stay.
The memories were too strong, the ghosts too loud. With the money, I funded a foundation in Grandma Rose's name, dedicated to protecting the vulnerable and fighting against corruption. It was my way of making amends, of turning the darkness into light. I moved far away, seeking solace and anonymity in a distant land. I changed my name, shed my past, and started anew. I never spoke of the events that had transpired, burying the memories deep within my subconscious, but they remained, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of human nature. They lost everything. I just smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had stared into the abyss and emerged victorious, but forever scarred. It was the smile of someone who understood that revenge, while sometimes necessary, is never truly satisfying. Revenge isn't sweet, it's necessary. It's a primal instinct, a desperate attempt to restore balance in a world that often feels chaotic and unfair. But it comes at a price. It consumes you, changes you, and leaves you forever altered. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more stories of justice.